YouTubers, how's it going out there in YouTube land? Hopefully it's going pretty well. Just another day in paradise, right? That's what I thought. Well, there's the rear end out of the 2000 4runner. It kind of exploded. Well, not really. I'll get to the story here in a second. But in my last video, I was tracking down a growling noise, especially about 40 miles an hour, 35, 40, and it would just constantly growl. It'd slow down, and it would go away. But at slow speeds, I heard some noise in the back coming from the back of this. It sounded like something that was kind of not grinding, but you can tell it was not right. It was making a low pitch, kind of a hissing sound. Then once it got about 35 or 40, then the growling noise kicked in. So I thought it was initially a front wheel bearing because the sound was actually coming from the front of the car. Just to show you how these noises sometimes can really fool you. Pulled the front wheel bearing off, checked it. I thought the driver's side was bad, but it turns out it was okay. I later found out, which I didn't make a video, and I should have probably done this. It turns out I had a little bit of dirt behind the rear seal that got up in there, and as I was turning that rotor, I could kind of hear that noise in there. I thought it was a bearing, but it turned out it was just dirt in there. So sometimes you can check your wheel bearings like that, turn them, and if it's really bad, you can feel it. You know you got a bad wheel bearing. But so that got me thinking, scratching my head. So I decided to go ahead and do the unthinkable. Well, some of you might think it's unthinkable, but when you're a mechanic, you got to do these things sometimes. I pulled out both axles and I dropped the rear end. Now, thankfully, Toyota made it pretty easy. To get out these axles in the back, you got to pop 4 bolts off, undo a brake line, which is right there, and unhook your emergency brake. Axle pulls right out. Now, if you have the ABS, do not worry about it right there. You don't have to take the ABS wire off. Some models you do, but not this one. You can see how that ABS is kind of flushed in there, that sensor, so you're good. And there is your seal. A lot of these seals leak. Mine did not leak. It's actually in pretty good shape. So I pulled the axles out in order to get the rear end out. Now, thankfully, I know I just said that, but I'll tell you why. I just said it a second time. These rear ends are pretty easy to take out. You got 10 millimeter bolts that you got to take out, and I believe they are 12 or 13 millimeter. Don't quote me on that. And I ripped the rear end apart because I knew this noise was coming from the back. Now I checked, before we get into the rear end here real quick, let me just show you what I did. Where are my axles? By the way, this is just a video I'm just doing on my cell phone today, so apologize if it's a little shaky. I'll do my best I can to keep it steady. There's the other axle, popped it out, same thing. The bearings in the rear axles are just fine, and I'll show you. Let me go around front here. My axles are up here in the front. Let me raise this door up real quick. Working on these 4runners is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But there is the axle I took out. And there's a bearing. And there's the sensor gear. And check this out. No noise whatsoever. Although it's got a little play, but that's pretty much to be expected in that. Because this is a pretty big bearing that goes down in there. But it's smooth. Makes no noise whatsoever. And by the way, you don't have to even take off your brake shoes. And here's the driver's side. Same thing over here. Has a little play, which is not that bad. Smooth. No noise whatsoever. So, that brought me right to the rear end. That's how I knew that rear end was probably a problem. So, I decided to go ahead and drop the rear end. Before I dropped the rear end, I unhooked the drive shaft from the yoke. And as I was spinning it, I could hear that noise in this rear end. It was grinding. I mean, it was bad. But it didn't have any play in it. It was just a bad pinion bearing up here. So I ordered a whole kit for $180 on eBay from a dealer. Should be here in about 4 or 5 days. And I wanted to show you one of the bearings. That's what I heard in the light. Pretty pitted up. Let me see if I can get it in the sunlight here just right for you guys. Maybe it's like this will do. Can you see how pitted that is there? Especially right there. Check that out right there. That is pretty bad. This is where my noise has been coming from. So, the point of this video is, if you have noise, a grinding noise, about 40 miles an hour, and you know the old story when you're driving, if you turn the wheel one way, turn it the other, the noise comes and goes back and forth, you know it's a wheel bearing. But if the noise is constant as you're doing that steering thing, as you're driving down the highway, if it's constant, it is a bearing in your rear end that's probably bad. The front ends, I really don't see this a lot. It's mainly the rear ends, because this is where all the torque is and all that. And as expected, I figured it would be a bearing, and that's what it was. And let's see if I can find the race that was riding it. Check that race out. Not good. Matter of fact, when I had to knock this pinion out, I likely never got it out because these bearings were seated in the race so bad it wouldn't release it, but I eventually got it out. And you're probably asking how I got this out. Well, I used a bearing buster, puller, whatever you want to call it, sitting over here. And you got to have a press. I use one of these guys here. I think you can see that. It might be upside down, I apologize, but you get the idea. It's a gear puller, bearing splitter set. And the only way I could get this off, and I apologize if this video is kind of long, I'll try to make it short as I can. You have to grip it right here on the top. I mean, put that bearing splitter right about there after you cut the bearings off, which were no good anyway. It's easier to cut the bearings off. Just use a guy like this, make a little slice in it, take a hammer and a chisel, and hit that baby like that, and it'll slide right off. But there's lots of tutorials online on how to do that. But anyway, turns out I had a bearing issue, and here's some of the other bearings. I don't know if you can see the pitting on these. That one's pretty bad. I know it looks like a mess here, but I've got a different workbench to set this all up on. And matter of fact, let's look at the pinion here real quick. Pretty good shape still. So, in a nutshell, I wanted to tell you guys, don't pull your hair out. If you have a constant growling noise, more than likely you've got a rear end bearing. It's bad. I see this a lot. So my new bearings should be here, I don't know, probably next week. Today's Friday. Probably next Wednesday or Thursday. We're expecting temperatures well below zero for a few days. So that might hang the mail up, make it a little slower. But the point is, I went to local auto parts stores, all through the name brand. They could not get any of this stuff for me. I went online, did some Googling, and I found some dealers that actually sell a lot of dealer-based 4runner stuff, rear end bearings, because these are quite common. They go out a lot. People need to replace them. Had no problem finding everything I needed. So I even get the crush sleeve with the new kit, and I'll show you that when it comes in. And let's see, where is my crush sleeve? There it is. Kind of sits on there like that. And you got also got a factory shim. I am only replacing bearings. I'm not doing anything else, so I can still use my factory shim once I set the rear end up and all that. Of course, now I can't get it. Bear with me a second. There we go. Little factory shim. Do not lose this guy. And this is actually a pretty thick shim for this rear end. Now, one other quick thing here. When you're measuring this, you need to find out what pinion size you have. Measure it from here to here if you don't have a door sticker. This one here is 7.8. Basically, they round it off to an 8-inch ring gear. And that's what I had to find out. So the bearing kit I ordered was labeled 7.8 inch ring gear. Basically is an 8-inch ring gear kit. So that's all good. I did a lot of research before I ordered my parts. So really all I have to do is clean out the rear end a little bit here, clean it up, clean all my parts, and start putting the bearings back in and all that good stuff, doing a wear pattern. But like I said, there are hundreds of videos online on how to do that. So I just want to let you know, I finally tracked down my noise that I had. And I really was hoping it wasn't the rear end, but in theory, deep down inside, I kind of figured it was the rear end that was bad. I just didn't want to face the reality of it. And let me give you a look here real quick. Let me tell you something. These bolts on the drive shaft on these Toyotas, those guys there, 12 millimeter, I believe. Those suckers, I had to put some force into breaking those loose. But anyway, there's the back of the rear end housing. It's opened up. And it's pretty easy to take off. I did it by myself. So, of course, I got lots of jacks and stuff under the frame, wheels, blocks, you name it. But a lot of people are having issues with these seals leaking. Luckily for me, I'm in pretty good shape. Now, pressing these bearings in on these axle here is another art. That's another completely different video. Let me just lay this down real quick. And you can see, didn't have to take the brake shoes off or anything. So, all right, so that's about it. I don't want to bore you guys anymore with the Toyota. So once I get this all together, we'll take it out, give you guys an update, and let you know how everything seems to be. I think I'm going to be in pretty good shape. I've already had a couple offers on this thing, which people are, I can't believe how much they're offering me for this, but I wanted to drive it for another week before I sell it. So there you go. If you have growling noises, folks, constantly, and it doesn't change with the pitch of the steering wheel driving down the highway, you probably got a bad rear end. So that's it for the update. Until my next video, guys, see you later, and thanks for watching.